Right, hello everyone. This video is for your Year 10 Summer Mark. It's a guidance video. This is not going to provide you with the answers. There will be a second video coming out with model answers, with answers to work through, but only after you've submitted your end of year exam to us. This first one is for the Germany mark. There's 6 questions, as you know. 4 mark, 8 mark, 4 mark, 8 mark, 12 mark. I'm going to go through each question individually, what you need to do. Some of the hints, tips, guidance might be slightly different from what your teacher has originally given you. Please use whatever you feel most comfortable with. I will have phrases and sayings, Miss Edwards will have phrases and sayings for her groups. So please just use whatever you feel most comfortable with. Right, let's begin to look at these questions. First part of the paper is interpretation based. Here's the first interpretation. This is adapted from The Secret War Against Hitler by Fabian von Schaubendorf. Easy for me to say. So that first and foremost, that bit of information there is the provenance. The provenance is really, really important to you. Remember, it gives you the context for the interpretation. Usually it's going to tell you things like who's saying it, what they're saying, who's saying it, when they were saying it, the kind of time frame it sits in, the context of where they were saying it maybe. All of these things are going to be really important to you, understanding the message they are trying to get across. Remember, what is crucial here is they want to have an impact on the audience. They're set out to get a message across. Second bit of information is the content. The content is the information they want to get across, but also into the content we start to look beyond the information. Look, are they angry? Are they sad? Are they happy? Are they trying to make us laugh, make us cry, make us hate someone, make us love someone? What do they want to achieve from the audience? What are the message that they are trying to get across when they were doing this? Right, some things you need to think about. I put some hints and tips on there. Let me just grab the highlighter pen. First of all, when you read this, you will notice we have never ever talked about this guy Fabian von Schlaubendorf, and therefore you may be tempted to panic. If this is the exam situation, you're thinking, oh my god, who is he? Don't know what I'm doing, don't know what to do about it. But read on and you will get some more clues. Schlaubendorf was a German officer who was part of the group that tried to assassinate Hitler in July 1944. Now automatically you should start to think, yes, that makes sense to me now, because I know in July 1944 it was the bomb plot, and I know the bomb plot is linked to Stauffenberg, and that was called Operation Valkyrie. I know that, so therefore actually I do know what they're talking about. I don't need to be worried. Secondly, you read on a bit more and it says he became a Christian minister and later worked as a judge. Now here's a guy who goes on, works in the church, works as a judge. In both those jobs, being impartial is really important, being fair is really important. So that might make us understand his own belief system, very, very Christian, and his belief system in legality and the law. So we might start to get a good idea of him as a person. Also, it should trigger some thoughts in our mind that we know there was a group in Germany called the Kressau Circle. The Kressau Circle believed they could be good Germans before being a good German didn't mean being a good Nazi, a very Christian group. And also there was some other Christian opposition, Protestant opposition, particularly in Germany, led by Niemöller and Bonhoeffer, and of course the Catholic opposition led by Cardinal Galen. So all of that information should now be swimming round in our heads before we've even looked at what they're saying. Now if you look at that, here's a guy, a Christian minister, books called Secret War Against Hitler, was involved in the bomb plot. I'm guessing the content, and before we read the content, should be going, Hitler was a bit of a nutter, we didn't really like him, we wanted to get rid of him, and this is why we wanted to do it. Let's have a look. What does the content actually say? It says the following. As a university student, here's the content bit here, look. As a university student, I read Nazi books which had ridiculous race theories and attacked Christian beliefs. Our anti-Nazi opposition in Germany was based on Christian faith. It was not started by army generals worried about military defeat. We had a clear conscience about trying to assassinate Hitler. Look, we were trying to kill Hitler because of our beliefs. We believed in God and the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is not this stupid race theory that the Nazis have been peddling. Exposed to the indoctrination techniques in school, exposed, but as a university student, wise enough to realise that's what they were. They were trying to indoctrinate us and make us think in a way, and we did not succumb to that. Now, you should be starting to think as well now about other university students in opposition, because there's a link here clearly to the White Rose group, Hans and Sophie Scholl. Now that, I've talked through it in about 4 minutes. In an exam, you've got to do that in about 20 seconds, because remember the 4-mark question, 4 minutes. So just think about that. Okay. The second interpretation, same we go. We look at it again. We look at the provenance. We look at the content. Then we begin to examine it. I'll put some keywords up there. So let's do exactly the same process with this highlight pen. Adapted from something by Melita Mashman. Well, again, we've not heard of Melita Mashman, and she's writing in 1963, well after the war. She's had time to consider and think about what she's going to say. Previous interpretation, 1959. Again, 15 years after the war, they've had time to think and consider their actions during the war and what they're going to say later on. In this extract, she remembers the 44 bomb plot. Brilliant. They're talking about the same thing. So it makes them easier to compare. Mashman joined the League of German Maidens in 1933, age 15, and later became head of publicity for the BDM, League of German Maidens. And after the war, she was still very Nazi in her beliefs. It gives you a lot of information about this woman there. She went to those schools, was indoctrinated, believed the propaganda, and therefore believed in the Nazi ideal all the way through. She didn't stop believing that. Again, we should be able to work out what the content's going to say. Here you go. It's going to say, I love the Nazis, everything they did was great, these people who tried to kill Hitler were crazy. We despise the motives of the Germans who tried to assassinate Hitler. We believe they must be criminals or madmen. The opposition activities of the White Rose student group, Hans and Sophie Scholl, disturbed us. We have failed to persuade them to join our cause or make National Socialism attractive. She can't understand it. This is a failure. The fact that these people haven't bought into that Nazi belief is a failure. Why have they not made that happen? So when you've looked at the two interpretations, when you've done that little bit of analysis, annotation, highlighting, you're going to move on to the questions. Question 1, always the same. How does interpretation A differ from interpretation B? I pre-highlighted that. How is the physical thing? How are they different? You get these in the camera. Where's the camera? 2 pens. How are they different? One's purple, one's white with purple bits. Yeah. One light. If you press the end of this one lights up, the other one doesn't. They're the differences between the 2 pens. That's what they're saying. How is it different? Let's see what we need to do on this. Right. In your answer, 4 marks. Use content only. This is just about the content bits of those interpretations. Use the content only and P twice. 2-point evidence explain combination of sentences. Really important. That's all you do. It's only worth 4 marks. Don't write too much. You write too much, you're wasting time. They can only give you 4 marks. Question is all about the content and the interpretations. What it is saying and what is different, and then explain the difference. In interpretation A, it says that everybody loved Hitler and he was great, whereas in interpretation B, it says everybody hates Hitler. That's a difference. Yeah? This is different because one loves it. You've got to explain it. Start by saying what is similar. Now, here's my top tip for answering this question. Start by saying what is similar. Both interpretations talk about the July bomb plot. However, they are different because, the example I've given there, both interpretations discuss the impact of Nazi indoctrination. However, they're different because one is about the success of the indoctrination, one is about the failure of the indoctrination. Get those points in, explain them, 4 marks. Yeah, remember balance points, 2 equal chunks of writing. Yeah, not one massive piece of writing, one little piece of writing. You've got to have 2 balanced pieces of information. Question 2, always the same again. Why might the authors have different interpretations? This is the provenance question. Yeah, same again, 2P contents bit, but the question is all about the provenance. Look at the authors, look at where they came from, look at what they've experienced, look at what they've lived through, look at when they're writing, look at where they're writing. Look at those things that have impacted on their life, yeah, that have allowed them to come to different conclusions about this time period. What is it that's made them think, act, behave in that way? Time, place, experience, influence. Said those already. Think about that. Again, start by saying what is similar. Both interpretations focus on this. However, they have different views because, now I realise there's a typing mistake in there. I'll edit that out later. Yeah, what has made them have different views? A grew up in this kind of lifestyle, went to these kind of schools, did this kind of things. B grew up in this kind of lifestyle, did these kind of things. A's father was a Nazi, B's father was a communist. You know, only go with what you know. You can't make those things up, but you've got to make it fit in 2 balanced points. 2 equally balanced points. Question 3, always the same again. Which interpretation do you find more convincing? Which is the best? Which one do you believe? Which one's most accurate? It doesn't matter how you write it down. 8 marks. So you've got to have more in this answer. You've got to spend more time on it. about 5 minutes on question 1, 5 minutes on question 2. For this, you're looking at 12 minutes. Yeah, spend 12 minutes on it. More convincing just means more accurate. It's just saying, look, I've read this one, I've compared it to what I know, all that contextual knowledge, not the dates, the figures, the people, the stuff I know, and what I've done is use that to assess how valid, accurate, convincing it is. Pick out the most convincing bits of each. Now, you must talk about both. Pick out the bits of A that are convincing and tell me why that's convincing. Cross-reference of your own knowledge. So, in interpretation A, they say that many students did not believe in what Hitler was saying. I know this to be true because I know, for example, in 1940, Hans and Sophie Scholl were arrested for da-da-da-da. Back it up with what you're saying. Interpretation A, this is more convincing because Mashman worked for the BDA, therefore her own account is accurate because, you know, she's got information from inside the organisation. That makes it, you know, plausible, believable. Take that into account, use your own knowledge. And then finish with the most convincing bit. When you get to the end of the answer, you know, take two bits from each source, make sure you've got a couple of bits from each source, and then when you get to say overall, the bit that I find most convincing, take the most convincing part and use that for your conclusion. Back it up with your own knowledge, have your own knowledge in there to explain why. Okay, question 4. Describe 2 problems. Now, again, this is do what it says on the tin question. It asks you to describe 2 problems. You don't need 5 problems, you don't need 6 problems, you need 2 problems. That's it. That's all you're going to use. Again, equally balanced. Two, let me get these on the screen, 2 equally chunked parts of that. A couple of sentences each. Do exactly what you're asked to do, always. Start by stating when hyperinflation was. You should know it's 1920, so you can go, look, hyperinflation 1923 affected the German people and the German government. The problems it caused for the German government, one problem was this was a problem because, another problem was this was a problem because. So, 2 balance. One problem was, which led to, which meant that. A repercussion of hyperinflation was. You've got to explain it. You can't just say a problem with hyperinflation was the government printed too much money. Well, actually, that's not a correct answer. The problem with hyperinflation was the overproduction of money meant devaluation of goods. This in turn led to, yeah? How do you get wages? How do you get people paid? You could talk about a repercussion. The repercussion of hyperinflation was, what did hyperinflation cause to happen and how did the German government deal with it? Think about those things. Question 5. In what ways were the lives of young people affected by Nazi policies? Now, the key bits in this question are explain your answer and in what ways. Yeah, we've got to work with those 2 points. Key skill here is knowledge. Show what you know. You're the expert. That's what your training is done. That's what all that learning is done. What is that knowledge you have built? Be specific, don't be general. Remember, it's not the same for everyone all the time. You can't just go, all people were in the Hitler Youth and they loved it. Nazi policies made all people join the BDM. Yeah, it's not true. It's different at different times. Yeah. Early in the Nazi reign, policies were X. This meant that Y. So you could say early in the Nazi reign, the Hitler Youth was really popular. By 1936, 66% of people were in the Hitler Youth. However, by 1938, they had to make this compulsory because. Yeah, I was saying, identify different periods at different times. So, you know, at the start of the war, it's great. Then at the start of the Nazi reign, it's great. Then they go off, so they make it law that you have to join. And then actually more and more people go, you know what, this is wrong. And they join opposition groups. So some people join the swing movement. Some people join the White Rose. Looks like older students join the White Rose movement. Some people join groups like the Edinburgh Pirates. Some are more active than others in their opposition. Some are just listening to jazz music. Some are openly beating up Hitler Youth and rescuing pilots who have been shot down during World War II. Think about eras, how you can define those eras. Early on in the Nazi reign, by the outbreak of war, in the era of total war. So you've got to have different people, different times, different impacts. It's not the same for everyone. Some policies are successful, some policies are unsuccessful. Some policies are really successful for working class boys, some policies are very unsuccessful for middle class girls. You've got to try and bring all of that information in to make it correct. And there you go, I'll put that when the Nazis first come to power in that. Right. Final question, the 12-mark question. It should take most of your time. It's worth most marks. Should probably in the exam have worked at this pace. 5 minutes for the first question, 5 minutes for the second question, 12 minutes for the third question. That's the first part of the exam. Yeah, 12, 5, 5, 22 minutes. 5 minutes for the next 4-mark question, 12 minutes for the next question. That's another 17 minutes. That's taking your total to 39 minutes. That means you've got in the exam 21 minutes left for this question. It's worth 12 marks. That should roughly be your times. Right. Which of the following groups benefited more from the Nazi economic policy? Explain your answer with reference to both groups. And the groups they give you are industrial workers, there you go, one group, and the owners of big business, the next group. They're the two groups they're giving you. You must talk about both of those groups. You must have a conclusion. So say, which one was it? Open with that point, finish with that point. Open with that point, finish with that point. Say what you're going to say it again. That essay building mantra. My introduction introduces what I'm going to say, then I explain it in more detail, then I refer back to it in my judgment section. Who are the industrial workers? Well, think about it. That's your average man in a factory. That's what we're talking about. How did it impact average man in a factory? And later on in the war, how did it affect average woman in factories? Remember the total war and the impact of that. Think about the things that were put in place and what benefited them. Did they benefit things like RAD, the DAF, the KDF? Remember what all those stands for? RAD, young topless men out doing things in the fields. DF, big trade union, canteens in the workplace, organised activities, radio, etc. KDF, strength through joy, all the bits. Reward the workers for all of these things. You know, did they benefit? Yes, no, explain. Big businesses, that's the owners, that's the people who own these businesses. How did they benefit? Well, government contracts. If you're building a big army, the rearmament, you're going to need guns. Guns need triggers, they need oil too, because they're made of wood and you have to oil them. You've got a load of new soldiers, they all need boots, they all need trousers, they all need underpants, they all need whatever. You know, it's the subsidiary industries. Go with them. Those contracts are given out by the government. If you are sweet talking the Nazis, you get contracts. If you don't understand that, if you struggle with that, if you've ever seen the film Schindler's List, you remember the start of Schindler's List. Oscar Schindler is out and about, and he's whining, dining, he's taking Nazi officers to dinner, he's sending them presents. The reason he's doing that is because they want them all to know who he is, and they go, oh, we've got a contract to make plates. Who do we know who makes plates? Oh, Oscar Schindler. That's what he's thinking about. Yeah. Think of then again how they also benefited. By the time of World War II, the SS are selling slave labour to them. They pay slave labour less than they pay full-time German labour. Well, in fact, they don't pay them anything. That's why it's slave labour. But they pay the SS to bring those people in to work for them. Overall, at the end, who's benefiting most? And the truth is, you've got to show how they link together. You've got to show positives and negatives. And you've got to sort of 21 minutes building that essay to write that. Finally, this last bit, you've all got a copy of this. It's really important. It's a breakdown, little checklist for each question. As you are doing this, have that in and go, yes, I've done that. Yes, I've done that. Yes, I've done that. Have it in front of you. So again, question 1, have you written about what, not why? Yes, I've talked about what. Have you explained how it's different? Yeah. Have you explained the physical difference? Yes, I've tick, tick, tick. And just go through tick, 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 tick. Always, always, always go through and tick, tick, tick. You follow this procedure. You've got good control of the English language, you've got good evidence and information because knowledge is the most important, you will pass this practice paper. Thank you very much for paying attention. Right, let's look at these answers and let's see what you should have put in your exam. Hopefully you've all landed the exam in, it's been marked, you've got some feedback in class, but this is just to give you an option of looking at some model answers. So question 1, you had the interpretation. It's a straightforward question of how these interpretations different. Excuse me. The answers I've written are designed to be at absolutely top level. So you'll see from the marks, there are always 1 or 2 marks off full marks, if not full marks. And that's what we're trying to achieve, just to get you into the habit of how to write the answers, what kind of language you're going to use, and what your answers should look like. The first thing you should notice straight away about this is it's in 2 equal parts. Yeah, anything that's in green has been added by the marker, anything that's in black is what I wrote myself. So the first answer to this, while both the interpretations discuss the attempted assassination of Hitler, there are clear differences in the motivation of opposition. I've started with a point that says that they're the same, talking about the same topic, but actually they are different. Interpretation A concentrates on the argument that this was a justifiable act based on Christian belief. So picked out from interpretation, what are they saying? Why did they act this way? Well, they're acting this way because of their Christian beliefs. Therefore, they're saying the opposition to Hitler, motivated by the Christian beliefs. However, interpretation B shows that the youth were also opposed to Hitler, as Mashman, right in the slide, describes Hans and Sophie Scholl. Again, to make that better, it's been saying you could put they were part of the White Rose opposition group, which was set up by some youth and had no religious affiliation. Could add that in, give that a little bit more detail if you've got time. Remember, you've got 4 minutes to write this answer. Furthermore, I've used that word because it's a great historical word. It's like furthermore, I'm adding another point. I'm giving you another point here. Please read it very carefully. What you're trying to do there is set up for the examiner a trigger that they go, they're writing a new point. I can add something here. I can get more marks. So that's the top bit finished. Here's the new marks. Furthermore, Schlappendorf identifies the books he read at university having ridiculous race theory, and his interpretation justifies and affirms his reasons for opposing Hitler based on his understanding and knowledge, and not because the army was losing the Second World War. Contextual knowledge there. A lot of people would argue that the reason that people tried to assassinate Hitler was because they were losing the war. What he's saying is, no, that's not what it was. We were doing this because we believed that what they were trying to do was indoctrinate the population in this way. This is different to interpretation B. Again, I'm highlighting the difference, as Mashman explains how she felt people who attempted to kill her were criminals or madmen, thus seeing the opposition in a very different way. 2 different points, equally balanced. What the marker said, well, they added the bits in green, and then at the bottom there's 3 out of 4, with the bits added in 4 out of 4. This showed good analysis of the content of the interpretation. Really good knowledge to explain the differences of content and interpretation, explain 2 different reasons. Green in green is what I would strengthen the explanation of this answer to allow it to get 4 out of 4 marks. So that's what you're looking at there. Okay, so question 2 focuses on why they're different. This is, we've always said, it's the provenance question. It's not about what they're saying, it's about why they are saying what they're saying. It's about what experiences they've gone through in life, what has impacted on their childhood, for example, their adult life, their working life, anything that has made them write in different ways. It might be where they live, it might be the time period they're writing in, it might be what they've been exposed to in terms of factors, like I said, in education. So let's look at these. So again, 4-mark answer here. Mark's put 4 out of 4. This answer used the provenance in order to explain the reasons why, capital letters, the interpretation is different. They've looked at the experience of the writing and the time they were written, so they picked out those things and said this is going to make them different. Interpretation A and B are from people who both experienced life in Nazi Germany during the Second World War. Again, I've started with that point that explains why they're similar. Their experiences during their education in Germany led them to different conclusions about the Nazi regime and the events of the GI bomb plot. There you go. They've had a different education, so they think differently. Mashman clearly was indoctrinated by the Nazi Party, and it identifies in the prominence she worked for the BDM, the League of German Maidens. Used the word indoctrinated rather than brainwashed, it's just slightly more sophisticated. She also believed in Nazism beyond World War II. Again, that's a direct quote from the provenance. So it shows I've read it and I'm using it. Her experience, showing I understand why, was not to question Nazism. Schlappendorf appears to have a different experience, perhaps with his university education and strong Christian beliefs. He was not as easily indoctrinated, missing the D, as Mashman. Mashman was expected to publicise and push the Nazi beliefs, whereas Schlappendorf was a Christian minister. He would have been able to accept the same views. Their experiences have made them believe different things. Both interpretations were written sometime after the Nazi regime, so they both had time to reflect and think about this time period. Interpretation A is attempted to justify the attempts on Hitler's life at a time when the world was well aware of Nazi atrocities. So he's reading much later and he's going, this is why we tried to kill Hitler. Well, people at that time would have gone, well, yeah, fair enough. Hitler was a psychopath. Hitler murdered 6 million Jews. However, interpretation B is explaining the viewpoint of many Germans who had believed Nazi ideals and lies. This is what I'm saying. Lots of people were indoctrinated, lots of people were brainwashed, lots of people were dragged in it. There doesn't seem to be an attempt to justify anything. She's not justifying it, she still believes it. She's still shocked by the actions of those who opposed the Nazis, and in the provenance it mentions that after World War II she was still committed to Nazi beliefs, which would account for why they have different views of opposition to Hitler. There you go. Taken all from the provenance, not the content. 4 out of 4. Question 3. Right. Which one is most convincing? Now this has got to be on the provenance, the content, and you've got to match it in with your contextual knowledge. So it's which one fits best with your understanding of the time period. So we've got to do 8 marks. So you've got 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, a little conclusion. Got 7 out of 8 marks. What the marker said was excellent answer, highlighting their good wide knowledge as well as clear understanding of both interpretations. The evaluation and the conclusion could be developed more with something such as the judgment that both views are valid and show that opponents were in the minority and all types of resistance failed to overthrow the regime. Totalitarian nature governments not allow illegal or political opposition use fear and violence to keep any form of opposition suppressed. Better answer if the conclusion had matched the size of the other paragraphs. develop it more. Right, so what did I write? Interpretation A and B are both convincing about the attitudes in Germany during the Total War period 1942 to 45. I've identified a time period and I'm saying they're both convincing. They show a range of responses from the German people to Nazi control. What is very convincing about interpretation B, you see, I'm picking out the convincing bits. What is very convincing about interpretation B is that it shows how completely some people have been indoctrinated by the Nazis. Yeah. The most convincing part of it. Mashman had clearly been through the Nazi education system, her school life controlled, but also her out of school activities controlled by the League of German Majors, which was compulsory after 1938. Contextual knowledge in there. Contextually, experience is typical, the same as many children who would be adults by 1944. They would have found the early days of Nazism very exciting and very successful. The appeal had not been tarnished by the effects of the war. Therefore, she sees it as a failure that the Scholz were not convinced. This was again typical of people's attitudes, even at the Scholz trial. Yeah, Marcus said, this is good, it shows very good contextual knowledge beyond the interpretations. Okay, now I'm going to give you the other interpretation. We use one of those key words, whereas. Could have used nevertheless, but whereas. And the examiner is now going, yes, there's another point coming, I can give them more marks. Interpretation B is less typical. It is nonetheless still convincing. So it's not as typical, but it's still convincing. It's not given the picture that would be most Germans, but it would be some. It shows how some people in Germany, why missing, did not succumb to indoctrination. It also shows how important the church opposition to the Nazis was at this time. Slobodov identified with groups like the Kressau Circle, contextual knowledge, believing himself to be a good German, not a good Nazi, despite still being patriotic enough to serve in the army. There may be some scepticism about his justification on the attempts of Hitler's life. Which is sometimes attributed to the fact it was inevitable the Nazis would lose the war by June 9, 1944. He's, however, very convincing when he derives the race theory people were taught in school. So there's bits in there that are very convincing, there's bits in there that are less convincing. You'll notice we've left the mistakes in. Now, I did this in the time condition, there's grammatical and little errors and mistakes, we left them in for a reason. We could have just corrected all this. The reason we've left those in is because that will happen in the exam. You'll be panicking, you'll be writing under time pressure. Little things like that won't matter, big mistakes do. What is clear is that by showing these opposing views, they become more convincing. It's like the useful thing. 2 is better than 1. More information I have, the bigger picture I can create. So what is clear by showing these opposing views is that they actually become more convincing. As a reader, it gives a much clearer, unbiased understanding of the period. Perhaps the most convincing part of either interpretation here, this is the crux, I've picked out the big bit here, this is my big moment, is the way Mashman in interpretation B was so utterly indoctrinated. This echoed in the biography of other Nazis like Hans Mettelmann. Wow, that's going to get loads of ticks because who's going to remember Hans Mettelmann? Well, we are, because we watched that video with him in it. You know, remember the old guy talking about his life in the Hitler Youth? Hans, I get that name in. We've done the interpretation practice question on that. It's great contextual knowledge. It shows you've really understood the course. I know that the indoctrination was particularly powerful for those that experienced the early pre-war experience of Hitler Youth. Look at that, I'm saying over time things changed. That first bit, wow, yeah, it's great to be in the Hitler Youth, everybody loved it. Later on, when the leaders had gone off to war and you were being taught by a sixth form, less interesting. And that's the education system. Equally, interpretation is very convincing because I know there was opposition from Christians in the Catholic Church, from Galen and Niemann and Bonhoeffer in the Protestant Church. Name drop, key names, get them in there, make it look like you know stuff. Overall, both interpretations are convincing in part, with interpretation B being more typical of young Germans and interpretation A start being atypical, great word, the opposite of typical, use it, does capture the mood of those like the Scholz who are post-Hitler. Yeah, could have extended the conclusion, it's 7 out of 8 marks. Question 4, straightforward again, it's 4 marks, bash bash, 2 points, equal points. One problem faced by the German governments when dealing with hyperinflation, a crisis that affected Germany in 1923. Look, I've got a date in, I know what I'm talking about, I've not confused it with the Great Depression, I've got the right date. Was ruling Germany. You know, in times of crisis, it's hard to rule. Think about the way Boris Johnson is trying to deal with the country in the COVID-19 experience. Loads of people are criticising it. At times of crisis, it's really easy to criticise the government. As confidence in the coalition government was limited, this led to social problems, unemployment, we know, loss of savings, hyperinflation, weak governance, which in turn cost the government support for passive resistance in the war. One of the policies that was there at the time of hyperinflation was passive resistance in the war. People stopped supporting it because they were running out of money, because their savings weren't anything. This was promised led to lack of support for government policies like Stresemann trying to introduce a new currency. One problem, explain, put in context of time. Another problem faced by the German government when dealing with hyperinflation was it led to the growth of extremist politics. When things are bad, we become more extreme in our views. People who are extreme become more appealing. Things were bad, therefore Hitler became more appealing. It led to growth. Votes and seats for the Nazis increased when in turn led to a right-wing revolt, the Munich Putsch. This came in the height of hyperinflation. Look at that key knowledge. I know when it was at its worst in November 1923. This was a problem which could potentially lead to the overthrow of the government. Mark says 4 out of 4. Excellent. You've explained 2 problems, develop your answer by explaining how they were problematic using your own knowledge to show the consequences. What you need to do, you should get at least 2 out of 4, if not 4 out of 4 on those answers. Question 5, we're into the big money questions now, the 8 mark and the 12 mark. Question 5 is about the lives of young people. You're thinking in your head when you write this, not the same for everyone all of the time. I've got to show that there's differences for different groups of different people at different times during this period to explain what how their lives change. If you go, oh, all children love being in the years, it's not, you know, you'll get some marks for it, but it's not accurate. The lives of young people were affected in many ways, like the lives of older people. I've compared it. I could have compared it to women. I could have compared it to workers. You know, show that they're trying to affect everybody. But the Nazis concentrated on young people because they could be influenced through school and youth organisations, like the Hitler Youth, the HJ, and the BDM, the League of German Maidens. Nazi propaganda had to make them loyal Nazis, and many were indoctrinated to believe in the Nazi ideology. Ideology is a great word. It's about a thought process and what they're trying to get into your mind. So again, use it. However, this experience was not consistent throughout the Nazi regime, so it's not the same for everyone. Those who joined the Hitler Youth before the war were seemingly more likely to succumb to propaganda. Yet young people who joined the Hitler Youth after 1939 experienced a military and harsh regime. As dissatisfaction or disaffection with the Hitler Youth grew, not all young people liked the Nazis, and eventually they tried to pass laws in 36 and 39 to make membership of Hitler Youth compulsory. As a result of this, the lives of some young people changed dramatically as they joined opposition groups like the Edelweiss Pirates. They became more prominent in the era of Total War 43 to 45, a risk that could lead to arrest and even execution. So what I've done there is I've put all my subject knowledge together and gone, you know what, at the start young people liked it, then they didn't like it, then some rebelled against it. So it's not the same for everyone all the time. I've repeated that knowledge. I used it in the last question. It doesn't matter. It's a separate question. You're allowed to repeat. Yeah. Mark's put excellent subject knowledge shown here, key organisations and dates. Equally, the impacts of life on young people was dependent on gender. I've introduced another factor, another facet here. It's not just about the start of the war, loved it, heading the way. It's different for boys and girls. Where boys were raised as soldiers, girls were raised to be mothers. Again, youth groups and propaganda was important here, and posters regularly showed mothers breastfeeding and girls with dolls. Again, this did not impact everyone, and girls like Sophie Scholl were outraged at the instructions by a Nazi visiting their university campus told them she should get pregnant for Germany. Again, highlight different gender marks there. Then my favourite historical word, furthermore. Furthermore, look at me, I know more, I'm going to give you more, I'm going to tell you more. Social class would have an impact on the work. As for many working class boys like Hans Mettelmann, gone back to him because I know him, the Hitler Youth will be the most important thing in their life. On the other hand, now I could have put however, I don't really like on the other hand, but I'm just using it because it's quite easy to use. Many middle class children were into swing music and jazz music. It was not just the social aspect of children's lives the Nazi Party attempted to control, but also school was heavily controlled. So I'm introducing another thing here again, talking about school. Therefore, children had a very different experience of education. RE, nativities, all religious aspects in school were banned by 1938. Key date, key information, key legislation, get it in there. This was of course coupled with young Jewish people being removed from the schools. For some young people, the Nazis gave them a sense of achievement and power, allowing them to wear the Hitler Youth uniform to school or attend special schools called Napolers, knowledge. The HJ also enforced Nazi policy like One Pot Sunday, knowledge. However, for other race science and eugenics led to a culture of bullying and failure. So for some people, they loved it. Yeah, I'm strong, I can march, I can do this. But if you were one of those kids who were bullied because of that, you're not going to enjoy that. Overall, the biggest changes in young people's lives came over time. Get the time sense in it. It's not just boom, boom, boom. Or it might be at the start it happened faster, at the end it happened slower. Get that time in there, explain it. The Nazis led them to believe they were the most important thing in Germany. For many, this lie was easy to believe, supported by early policies and success in World War II. You know, if you're being told you're the greatest thing on earth and then you start to win a war, you're like, yes, come on. However, as the war became a reality, young boys became soldiers, young girls pressurised more and more into traditional roles. What was once exciting now became oppressive. Marcus said 8 out of 8, fantastic, great subject knowledge, good explanation of change arising from different such as time, group, social impacts supported by knowledge and understanders, and long and short term impact policies too. It's got a bit of everything, that answer. I'm particularly pleased with it. Okay, question 6 is the big one, 12 marks. You've got to get in there your paragraphs. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybe paragraphs. You're looking at 4 to 6 paragraphs. You've got to get in there. You've got to get both bullets in there and you've got to explain them in detail. It was a tough question, this. I found this really hard to write. The two things that they give you are big business and economic workers, industrial workers. You've got to explain how they benefited. So let's look at what I wrote. Big business and workers benefited enormously from Nazi economic policies. Straight in with the words of the question. Always start with the words of the question. It shows you're going to answer it. When Hitler became Chancellor in January 1933, there were 6 million people unemployed and the German economy was stagnating. Highlight what the problem was, show he's going to deal with it. By the time Hitler was Führer, just over a year later, again I'm getting that contextual knowledge in all the time, he knew the economy and particularly rearmament was at the forefront of his planning. The man tasked with fixing this was Hjalmar Schacht. Drop a key name. The policies brought in by Schacht and then his successor Göring, key names again, definitely improved workers' lives. However, they did more for big business like Daimler and Siemens, I've got names of big business, who benefited from government contracts and longer term slave labour during World War II. That tells you what my answer is going to be. I'm going to say, yeah, the workers benefited, but the big business benefited more. If my answer doesn't say that, my introduction is wrong. My introduction should say the same as my middle should say as the conclusion. Schemes were put in place almost immediately by the Nazis to get back to work. At the forefront of this was the DF led by Robert Lee. The DF replaced all banned trade unions Germany worked to improve, and I put that in inverted commas for a reason, for workers. Examples of what the DF introduced were canteens for workers, hot meals, radio speaker systems, I've got them in there. Of course, the canteens had to be built by the workers. Thus, great word, they were giving up their weekends for the Nazi regime. Think about how this controlled their lives. Furthermore, the speakers were used to broadcast almost non-stop Nazi propaganda. So this was really just another way of the Nazis indoctrinating the population. So I'm saying, look, man, it looks like their life's getting better, but it's not really. Another branch of the DF was the KDF, or Strength Through Joy. This meant workers earned rewards or could pay into special schemes. The most famous of this was the People's Car. Remember that Volkswagen Beetle thing? Although very few actually received one. Many workers did though benefit from outings and holidays. Typically holidays with cruises, which again gave the Nazis a captive audience for their propaganda as well as work schemes. The Nazis also eradicated unemployment. So what I've done there is said, yeah, look, the workers did benefit, but what I'm highlighting, because my answer is going to be that it's in big business more, is that the benefits were not actually real. They thought they were better off, but they weren't. Please note, I've finished with the word eradicated unemployment. So therefore I should start my next paragraph with that. The zero unemployment figure, though, is much more like many Nazi policies. In fact, it's misleading. It's smoke and mirrors. Statistics only tell you part of the story. Schemes like the RAD kept young men from unemployment figures, as did conscription. 1.5 million men in the army not employed. All in all, German workers were better off, and I put off, it should say off again, mistake, writing quickly, than they were in 1929, but not as well off as they were pre-World War I. So they thought they were better off, but they actually weren't. This means the benefits for people were real. For example, they got bread and work like the Nazis had promised. However, in reality, wages rose, but in general were lower than 1928. Most new jobs are paid for by the state, and therefore longer term were unsustainable. And in fact, during World War II, working weeks rose from 49 to 60 hours, which is benefiting big business more than it's benefiting the workers. Okay, next paragraph. The Nazis were quick to implement measures to ensure rearmament in Germany. This required Germany to achieve autarky or self-sufficiency. Not being able to do this rapidly enough cost Schacht his job, and he was replaced by Göring, whose 4-year plans would benefit big business. So I'm getting into the second part of my essay. I'm going to say why big business was better off. The Nazis would give out government contracts to those involved in rearmament or supply businesses. A famous recipient being Oskar Schindler, whose factories would employ slave labour provided by the SS. Although we know Schindler went on to save the lives of many Jews. Equally, big businesses benefited from the removal of trade unions and cooperation with the DF, which allowed them to alter working and wage patterns. So it looked like it was better for the workers, but it's actually better for the bosses. Furthermore, production was all geared towards rearmament and not consumerism. So business owners made big profits, but the workers couldn't buy anything because they're only making things for the army. So workers endured rationing, and there's propaganda slogans like guns not butter. The Nazis also promised to curb the power of monopolies, so they didn't want big businesses controlling one area and controlling prices. But in fact, by 1937, the Nazis controlled 70% of all production themselves. Rearmament began in 1935 and onwards. This boosted profits of big weapons companies, and the managers of major industrial companies saw their incomes rise by 50% in 1933 to 1939. So think about that. Big businesses, their wages are going up, 50% increase. We know in real terms workers are working longer for less money. This is direct action to workers with real wages decrease. Also, workers were exposed to heightened risk of industrial action, which say industrial accidents, and could be blacklisted if they complained. So if you moan about it at work, you say, right, you didn't get a job, and you didn't get another job in Germany. Overall, workers may have felt they were better off from the Nazis. Keep coming back to that point as they come out of a terrible depression. State control and building of infrastructure like autobahns, schools and hospitals gave the appearance of success. The sacrifice, their sacrifice, wrong there. Their sacrifice, wrong there. You see what you do when you're panicking? Their sacrifice in enduring rationing and longer working hours would have been validated by success in early World War II. Yet as Germany entered the period of total war, the pressure on workers, the introduction of refugee and slave labour, all meant the main benefit was going to business owners and higher-ranking Nazi officials, not the workers. Put in their beautiful confusion, both bullet points fully explained, clearly explained all the information, 12 out of 12. There's some errors in there. I put the wrong off, I put the wrong there, I put action instead of accident. That will happen when you're trying to complete these 6 questions in 50 minutes. Yeah, we could have taken those out. Like I said on the other slide, we've left them in to show you that little mistakes won't make massive differences. Consistent mistakes. If every paragraph in there I put the DFA instead of DF, it would be obvious. Where I put obviously the next bit I've got it right. That's what you've got to be careful about, just getting those things right.